Imagine for a second that confidence is basically a bank account.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Right. Because most of us, well, we operate under this assumption that before you can write a massive check, like before you can walk into a room and really command attention, or, ask for a huge raise, or even just expect to be treated with respect, you have to check your balance.
You have to know what you're working with.
Exactly. You need this undeniable, quantifiable proof that you actually deserve it. So you either have the funds, like the Ivy League resume, the massive wealth, the decades of experience, the fancy C-suite job title, or you simply don't.
Right. It feels very binary to most people.
Yeah, totally binary. You
Yeah.
earn the status, and really only then are you allowed to project the authority.
Which is, it's a very comforting way to view the world, honestly, because it implies this strict, very rational meritocracy.
Oh, for sure. We want it to be fair.
We deeply crave the idea that social dynamics are essentially, a mathematical equation. Like your input, your hard work, your credentials exactly equals your output in terms of respect and power.
It feels like the rules make sense that way.
Right. It feels fair. But the moment you look at history, or frankly, just look around a modern boardroom today, that entire mathematical model just completely falls apart.
It just shudders. Like you realize the vault is completely empty, the bank is closed, and the currency we're all stressing over is, well, it's entirely made up.
Completely fabricated.
Yeah. We are operating in a social landscape that is basically a shared hallucination. The entire edifice of who gets respected, who gets promoted, and who gets ignored is built on something incredibly fragile and entirely psychological.
It is.
It turns out the way you carry yourself doesn't just reflect how the world treats you, it literally dictates it.
It dictates it because fundamentally humans are cognitive misers.
Cognitive misers. Okay, break that down for me.
Basically, we just don't have the time or the mental energy to deeply evaluate the underlying worth of every single person we meet. It's exhausting.
Right. You can't run a full background check on everyone at a networking event.
Exactly. So we look for shortcuts. We look at how a person evaluates themselves.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so if you walk into a room and your posture, your tone, your boundaries signal that you consider yourself highly valuable, the human brain just subconsciously assumes, well, they must have a reason to feel that way.
Like, I should treat them accordingly.
Right. You're essentially setting your own price.
But setting that price is a terrifying tightrope walk, isn't it? Like, how do you project genuine confidence and set those unshakable boundaries without slipping into, delusional arrogance?
It is a very fine line.
Because if you get it wrong, you don't just look foolish, you get completely destroyed.
Oh, absolutely.
So to figure out that delicate alchemy, we actually need to look at what happens when someone gets it spectacularly, historically wrong.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah, we need to talk about a man who was handed the ultimate symbol of authority, the literal crown of a nation, and then practically tripped over himself trying to throw his aura away.
Let's go to Paris, July 1830.
The scene in Paris right then is just absolute chaos. I
Yeah.
mean, the country is in the violent grip of a revolution.
Again.
Again, exactly. The streets are barricaded, the political landscape is incredibly volatile, and the sitting king, Charles X, has literally just been forced to abdicate.
So there's this massive power vacuum.
A terrifying power vacuum. And a commission made up of the highest authorities in the land has to scramble to choose a successor.
Right, because they are terrified of crowning another tyrant, which would just lead to more guillotines, I assume.
Yes, but they also desperately need stability. They need a Goldilocks candidate, basically. Not too hot, not too cold.
And they find him in a guy named Louis-Philippe, the Duke of Orleans. Now, right out of the gate, his positioning is inherently weak. Very weak. He comes from a cadet branch of the royal family, so he didn't inherit the crown in that traditional, unquestioned, divine right kind of way.
He was essentially appointed by a panicked committee.
Exactly. In the eyes of the traditionalists, he's basically a middle manager who just got a battlefield promotion.
So the strategic move for someone in that vulnerable position would normally be, what, to overcompensate?
Typically, yes. To
Yeah.
overcompensate with majesty. You'd adopt the grandest, most awe-inspiring trappings of royalty just to solidify that shaky legitimacy, right? To project an aura of absolute permanence.
Make them believe you're supposed to be there.
Right. But Louis-Philippe makes a fascinating and ultimately fatal psychological choice here.
Yeah.
He decides he is going to be the bourgeois king.
The bourgeois king. He
Yeah.
tries to be the cool boss.
He does. He consciously decides to dissolve the aura that naturally pertains to leadership.
Which is wild.
It is. He genuinely disliked ceremony. You know, the heavy robes, the grand pronouncements. He actually had more friends among the wealthy bankers and businessmen of Paris than he did among the traditional nobility.
Okay.
So he attempts to downplay his status. He wants to mix with the middle-class citizens who had essentially called him to lead, thinking that if he acts like them, well, they will love him.
The visual of this is just staggering to me. I mean, this is the King of France we're talking about. And what are his symbols of office?
Oh, it's so bad.
He ditches the scepter. He ditches the crown. He literally puts on a gray hat, grabs a standard umbrella, and he just strolls proudly through the muddy streets of Paris.
Just a guy with an umbrella.
Yeah, he's twirling his umbrella, acting like a common citizen out for a Sunday walk, tipping his hat to the shopkeepers.
And we really have to look at how he handled the real power players, because that's where this strategy truly collapses.
Right, because shopkeepers are one thing, but the big players are another.
Exactly. Consider his relationship with James Rothschild, who was the most important banker in France at the time. Louis-Philippe invites Rothschild to his palace.
Okay, sounds normal.
But he doesn't receive him as a monarch receiving a subject. He treats him as an absolute equal.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, unlike any king before him, Louis-Philippe didn't just talk business with Monsieur Rothschild. Business was literally all he talked about.
Right, because he loved money.
He had amassed a huge personal fortune, he loved money, and he desperately wanted to be seen as just another extremely successful businessman.
But wait, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
Because on paper, to a modern listener, Louis-Philippe sounds kind of like a pioneer. He sounds exactly like what every leadership seminar tells you to be today.
The modern corporate CEO.
Yeah. The guy who rips out the mahogany corner office, puts a beanbag chair in the break room, wears a hoodie to the shareholder meetings, and insists that the intern call him buddy. We are told constantly to be relatable, to flatten the hierarchy. So why is Louis-Philippe's umbrella such a mistake?
Because the power dynamic still exists. And pretending it doesn't is honestly just an insult to everyone's intelligence.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Think about that CEO in the hoodie. The employees sitting on those beanbag chairs know that at the end of the day, that guy still signs their paychecks.
Yeah, he can fire them tomorrow.
He still has the power to ruin their livelihood. When a person with absolute power pretends to be your equal, it doesn't feel like humility. It feels like a trap.
A trap, like they're waiting for you to slip up.
Exactly. It makes people deeply uncomfortable because they don't know the rules of engagement anymore. It just makes the leaders seem completely disingenuous.
That is such a vital distinction. It's a costume. It's not real.
Not at all.
And the backlash Louis-Philippe faced was entirely predictable when you map out the psychology of it. The aristocracy, the old guard, obviously despised him.
Oh, they hated him. They simply could not endure the sight of an unkingly king. It offended their entire worldview, and they turned their backs on him almost immediately.
But you'd think the common people, like the shopkeepers he was tipping his gray hat to, you'd think they would love him, right?
They absolutely loathed him.
Really? Why?
Well, the growing class of the poor, including the radicals who'd actually fought and bled on the barricades to chase out the previous king, they found zero satisfaction in a guy twirling an umbrella.
Right, because an umbrella doesn't put food on the table.
Exactly. They realized they had a ruler who neither acted as a king nor governed as a man of the people. Because while he dressed like a bourgeois citizen, his policies heavily favored the ultra-wealthy.
Ah, so the visual was a total lie.
A complete lie.
And then there's the ultimate backfire.
Yeah.
The bankers, the very people he was trying to impress by talking business as an equal.
This is the most devastating psychological consequence of lowering your own price.
What happened?
Well, the bankers, to whom Louis-Philippe was the most beholden, they soon realized something very dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
The mystique of royalty is that a king is above commerce, right?
Yeah.
A king operates on a plane of divine destiny.
Yeah, they're untouchable.
But by stepping into the ledger, Louis-Philippe made himself measurable. And once you are measurable, you can be found lacking.
Oh, wow. That is profound.
The bankers realized, well, if the king insists on being just another businessman, we actually have more money and more influence than he does. Therefore, we are the ones who actually control the country.
They completely lost all fear of him.
Completely.
There's this incredible historical anecdote from the sources where a train trip is organized for the royal family, and James Rothschild, the banker, actually berates the King of France in public for being late.
Just yells at him.
Stop and picture that. The monumental shift in power required for a civilian banker to yell at a monarch in front of an audience.
It's unthinkable in any other era.
Louis-Philippe invited the banker to be his equal, and the banker happily accepted, and then immediately relegated the king to an inferior.
By removing his own crown, Louis-Philippe basically invited everyone else to treat him like a subject. And the historical results were catastrophic.
It didn't end well.
No. Eventually, the workers' insurrections that had brought down his predecessor started to reemerge. The people were starving, the inequality was worse than ever, and Louis-Philippe tried to put the rebellions down with force.
But what was he even defending at that point?
Exactly. He clearly disdained the majestic institution of the monarchy, and he actively prevented a true democratic republic. It became obvious to everyone that he was only using the state apparatus to defend his own personal fortune.
And the fortunes of his wealthy banker friends.
Right. And that does not inspire soldiers to hold the line.
So by early 1848, citizens of all classes are demonstrating in the streets for electoral reforms. The demonstrations turn violent. Louis-Philippe panics.
Total panic.
He fires his prime minister and appoints a liberal replacement, just hoping to appease the mob. But that just proves he can be bullied, doesn't it?
It showed he had absolutely no internal fortitude. The people smelled blood in the water.
And the demonstrations turned into a full-fledged revolution with gunfire?
Yes. On the night of February 23rd, a massive crowd surrounded the Tuileries Palace. And Louis-Philippe, the man who tried so hard to be the friendly bourgeois king, abdicated that very evening.
He just gave up.
He disguised himself and fled to England. He left no successor. He left no real legacy. His whole government basically folded up and dissolved like a traveling circus leaving town in the middle of the night.
A traveling circus. What a pathetic end.
It really was.
But what's fascinating to me is that Louis-Philippe wasn't entirely wrong about the changing tides of history. He correctly sensed that a new world was dawning, a world where the divine right of kings was a dead concept.
He saw that leaders would eventually need to act and be more like ordinary citizens.
Right. So he was right about the changing political structure, but he was profoundly, fatally wrong about the psychology of power within that structure.
Because power still requires an aura. It still requires presence.
Even in a democracy.
Especially then.
Okay.
The hat and umbrella amused the French for a hot minute, but it quickly grew irritating because everyone knew it was an affectation. The public is incredibly perceptive when it comes to authenticity.
They can sniff out a fake.
Always. They knew the divisions of wealth in France had never been greater, so the umbrella felt like a mocking pantomime of equality.
It's like the billionaire politician putting on a brand new flannel shirt to go talk to factory workers.
Yes, the perfect modern equivalent.
The workers aren't stupid. They know the shirt has literally never been washed and the politician just stepped off a private jet. It highlights the disparity rather than hiding it.
Exactly. Even radical revolutionaries understand the need for a powerful aura. Robespierre, who led the Reign of Terror during the French Revolution 50 years earlier, he understood that a leader must be a showman.
You have to command the room.
Napoleon, who turned a chaotic republic into a continent-spanning empire, knew it in his bones. In fact, right after Louis-Philippe fled, the French elected a president.
Oh, this is the irony of it all.
It really is. They elected a guy who was practically a nobody in terms of personal achievement. But he was Napoleon's grandnephew.
Just banking on the name.
They elected him purely hoping he would recreate the great general's powerful aura and just wash away the awkward, uninspiring memory of the guy with the umbrella.
So if Louis-Philippe's false chumminess failed so spectacularly, it raises a massive question for our deep dive today.
How do you do it right?
Exactly. How do you actually connect with people beneath you in a hierarchy without losing your authority? Because there are historical figures who were beloved by the common people, who championed the working class, but who never lost their royal bearing.
Yes.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt comes to mind immediately. I mean, he led America through the Great Depression. He was a hero to the destitute, but he was practically American royalty.
FDR is the perfect counterexample to Louis-Philippe. He provides the master blueprint for what we might call the patrician heart.
The patrician heart. I like that.
FDR's style was fundamentally different. He successfully communicated that he shared the values, the struggles, and the goals of the common people, but he never ever pretended he wasn't who he was.
Right. He didn't put on a fake working class accent. He didn't hide his inherited wealth.
Not at all.
He's out there with the cigarette holder tilted up at that jaunty angle, the pince-nez glasses, the sweeping cape, speaking with that clipped upper-crust Hyde Park accent.
He projected immense privilege.
So why didn't people hate him for it?
Because he understood that humility is not about performing averageness. Humility is about recognizing your own limitations and respecting the inherent dignity of others.
That's a huge distinction.
FDR didn't lower his status to meet the people. He elevated the people's concerns to match his massive status.
Oh, wow. I want to underline that. He didn't lower his status to meet them. He elevated their concerns to his level. That completely reframes how a leader should operate. If you manage a team, you don't need to pretend you don't have the final say.
Right. You don't.
You don't need to force everyone to go to happy hour and pretend you're all just college buddies. You maintain the distance, you maintain the authority, but you use that authority entirely to protect, champion, and elevate your team.
Precisely. Leaders who try to dissolve the natural distance of leadership through false chumminess, they don't gain friends. They gradually lose the ability to inspire loyalty, fear, or love.
They just elicit contempt.
They become, like Louis-Philippe, too uninspiring even to be worth the guillotine.
Okay, so the trap of artificially lowering your status is clear. But if lowering your price is a disaster, we have to look at the polar opposite.
The other extreme.
Right. What happens when someone artificially inflates their status beyond all logical reason? What happens when a person has absolutely zero resume, no wealth, no legitimate claim to power whatsoever, and yet demands to be treated like an emperor anyway?
To answer that, we have to travel from 19th century Paris to the royal courts of 15th century Europe.
Okay, let's do it.
We have to examine the sheer, unadulterated audacity of Christopher Columbus.
Now, everyone knows the myth of Columbus in 1492, but the reality of his origins, the actual mechanics of how he got those ships, is starkly different from the legend we're taught in school.
It is perhaps the greatest con job in human history.
It really is. When Columbus was trying to find funding for his voyages, he floated this elaborate backstory. He claimed he was a descendant of a Count Colombo of the castle of Cuccaro.
So it's very fancy.
Very fancy. He said his lineage traced back to a legendary Roman general named Colonius, and that he had cousins who were direct descendants of an emperor of Constantinople. It sounds incredibly illustrious.
And it was entirely fabricated.
Entirely made up.
Columbus was actually the son of Domenico Colombo. Domenico was a humble weaver in Genoa. He eventually opened a small wine shop and later made his living as a cheese vendor.
A cheese vendor's son.
A cheese vendor's son. And yet, from a very early age, Columbus felt this overwhelming conviction that destiny had singled him out for greatness.
He genuinely believed he had royalty in his blood, despite all physical evidence to the contrary.
He did. So what did he do? He just started acting like it.
It is the ultimate manifestation of fake it till you make it, but executed on a geopolitical scale.
Exactly. Columbus had a pretty uneventful early career as a low-level merchant sailor. But when he settled in Lisbon, Portugal, he leaned entirely into this fabricated noble persona.
He just wore it like a tailored suit.
He carried himself with such absolute, unquestioned superiority that he actually managed to marry into an established Lisbon family that had excellent connections with Portuguese royalty.
And this is where the story genuinely breaks my brain.
It's wild.
Through his new in-laws, this merchant with zero significant achievements finagles a face-to-face meeting with the King of Portugal, King João II. Columbus pitches the king on financing a westward voyage to discover a shorter route to Asia. Now, pitching an expedition is one thing, but listen to the demands Columbus lays on the table.
They are outrageous.
He tells the king, I will claim the lands in your name, but in return, I demand the title of Grand Admiral of the Oceanic Sea. I demand the office of Viceroy over any and all lands I find. And I want 10% of all future commerce with those lands. Hereditary, for my family, for all of time.
We really need to pause and contextualize how insane these demands were.
Please do.
Columbus was a nobody. He knew almost nothing about formal navigation. He could not work a quadrant, which was the essential navigational tool of the era.
So he literally couldn't navigate.
He had never commanded a ship, let alone an expeditionary fleet. He had zero leadership qualifications. Furthermore, his pitch to the king included no actual technical details on how he would survive the journey, just vague, sweeping promises.
I try to map this onto a modern scenario, and it's hilarious.
Oh, what's your analogy?
Imagine a guy whose only job experience is working a cash register at a regional grocery store.
Okay.
He walks into the executive suite of Apple or Google. He sits down with the CEO. He has no business plan, no degree, no coding experience. He says, I have a vague idea that might double your global market share. In return, I want to be named executive vice president of the company. I want to be the CEO of any new subsidiary we create. And I want 10% of all global sales paid directly to my family in perpetuity.
It's laughable.
In any rational universe, security is dragging that guy out by his collar before he finishes the sentence.
Exactly. So how did King Zhao II react to this cheese vendor's son making these astronomical demands?
You must have laughed him out of the room.
He smiled. He politely declined the offer, but he left the door open for future discussions.
Wait, really?
He did not call the guards. He did not lash Columbus out of the room. He didn't even question his background or his credentials. Even as he turned down the specific financial demands, he treated Columbus and his proposal as completely legitimate.
Why? I genuinely struggle with this. Why would a king treat such an absurd demand from a fundamentally unqualified person as legitimate? Why didn't he see right through him?
Because of a fascinating glitch in human psychology regarding price and value.
Okay, tell me more.
In economics, there's a concept called a Veblen good. It's a luxury item where the demand actually increases as the price goes up, simply because the high price signals exclusive status.
Like a Rolex or a designer bag?
Exactly. Columbus applied the Veblen effect to his own identity. The king was actually impressed by the sheer, unblinking boldness of the requests.
He respected the hustle.
King Zhao felt comfortable in the company of a man who acted so confidently. By asking for the moon, without a hint of desperation or irony, Columbus instantly raised his own status.
It's a psychological trap.
A brilliant one. The trap works like this. The king subconsciously assumed that unless a man who set such an astronomically high price on himself is clinically insane, and Columbus does not appear insane, he was calm, eloquent, and composed, then he must somehow be worth it.
Wow.
The audacity forces the other person to doubt their own assessment. Zhao thought, if he's asking for this much, there must be something I'm missing. He must be exactly the noble visionary he claims to be.
Columbus forced the king to fill in the blanks with his own imagination.
Yes.
That meeting must have been a massive revelation for Columbus. He realized, my God, the act works. They believe it.
It validated everything.
So a few years later, he moves to Spain. He uses his Portuguese connections to infiltrate the elevated circles of the Spanish court. He's rubbing shoulders with dukes, princes, and financiers. And to every single one of them, he repeats the exact same outrageous demands.
And the crucial detail is that he never wavered.
He didn't drop his price?
He spent years facing rejection, but he never lowered his price. He never said, okay, maybe just 5% and a knighthood.
Right.
Some powerful nobles, like the Duke of Medina, actually wanted to fund him, but they couldn't, because they simply lacked the power to grant him the massive royal titles he demanded.
He outpriced the dukes.
Columbus essentially priced out everyone except the ultimate authority. He realized only one person could meet his price, Queen Isabella.
So in 1487, he charms his way into a meeting with the queen. He becomes a fixture at the palace. Fast forward to 1492, the Spanish finally expel the Moorish invaders, which frees up the royal treasury.
The timing was perfect.
Isabella decides to pull the trigger. She agrees to pay for his 3 ships, the equipment, the salaries, everything. But the real victory isn't the ships. Isabella actually draws up a formal contract granting Columbus the titles and the rights he had been demanding for years.
The only thing she denied him, and she hid it in the fine print of the contract, was the 10% of all revenues with no time limit.
Oh, she snuck that out.
Which is historically fascinating, because had that clause remained intact, Columbus and his descendants would have eventually become the wealthiest family in human history by an unimaginable margin.
Unbelievable.
But Columbus was so deeply satisfied that his core demands for noble titles and viceroy status were met that he signed the contract and set sail.
And before he left, he was careful to hire the best actual navigator he could find to do the real work because he still had no idea what he was doing.
He needed someone to actually steer the boat.
Yeah. As an explorer, Columbus was terrible. He knew less about the sea than the average sailor swabbing the decks of his ships. He could never reliably determine latitude and longitude.
He famously mistook islands in the Caribbean for the vast continent of Asia.
He was a disastrous administrator and treated his crew poorly.
But in one singular, highly specific area, he was an absolute world-class genius. He knew how to sell his own myth.
The ultimate salesman.
How else does the son of a Genoese cheese vendor ingratiate himself with the highest royal families of Europe? He had this mesmerizing power to charm the nobility, and it all stemmed entirely from the way he carried himself.
He projected a sense of destiny that just warped reality. But I want to make sure we don't misinterpret this. It wasn't an aggressive, ugly, chest-beating kind of self-promotion.
No, not at all.
He wasn't the guy at the networking event aggressively shoving his business card in your face and talking over everyone. It was a quiet, calm self-assurance.
That distinction is the key to the entire strategy. It was the exact same quiet confidence usually exhibited by the nobility themselves.
Ah, so he mimicked them.
The powerful and old-style aristocracies felt no need to aggressively prove or assert themselves. Being noble, they inherently believed they deserved more, and they simply expected it to be given to them.
It's just their right.
So when the nobility interacted with Columbus, they felt an instant subconscious affinity. They recognized one of their own. He carried himself the way they did, elevated above the crowd, calm, destined for greatness.
There's a quote from Friedrich Nietzsche that perfectly encapsulates this phenomenon. Nietzsche wrote, "With all great deceivers, there is a noteworthy occurrence to which they owe their power. In the actual act of deception, they are overcome by belief in themselves. It is this which then speaks so miraculously and compellingly to those around them."
Such a powerful quote.
Columbus wasn't winking at the camera. He believed his own myth so deeply, so fervently, that the reality of the Spanish court just bent around him to match it.
That is the ultimate takeaway from his story. It is entirely within your power to set your own price in this world.
Just decide what it is.
Exactly. How you carry yourself reflects what you think of yourself, and the world will adopt your valuation. If you ask for little, if you shuffle your feet, lower your head, and apologize when you make a request, people will immediately assume this behavior reflects your true internal worth.
They believe the physical evidence you're giving them.
But that behavior isn't inherently you. It is only a strategic choice you've made in how to present yourself.
You can just as easily choose to present the Columbus front. Buoyancy, unshakable confidence, the radiating feeling that you were born to wear a crown.
Exactly.
Which leads us to the most practical part of this discussion, the core mechanics of how to actually pull this off.
Right, because it's hard to just flip a switch.
Because it's one thing for us to sit here and say, sure, just act like Columbus and demand 10% of the company. But if you try that tomorrow and you don't possess that deep internal belief, you're just going to look like a desperate con artist and you will get fired.
You'll be escorted out of the building.
Right. So how do we cultivate that unshakable internal belief when we feel entirely ordinary? The psychology behind this is what our deep dive source calls the strategy of the crown.
The strategy of the crown starts with a profound psychological observation about human development. Think about childhood.
Okay.
As children, we start our lives with massive exuberance. We expect and demand everything from the world. A child doesn't ask for permission to dream of being an astronaut or a king. They simply state it as a fact.
They just declare it.
They have no concept of their own limitations, no sense of social hierarchy telling them what they can or cannot have. And this natural exuberance often carries over into our early youth, our first forays into society, our first ambitions.
But then life happens.
Yes.
As we grow older, we experience rebuffs. We face failures. We apply for things and get rejected. People tell us no. Parents, teachers, and bosses tell us to be realistic, to stay in our lane.
It's a constant conditioning.
And those rejections act as psychological fences. They set up boundaries in our minds that only get firmer and higher with time. We start to expect less from the world. We accept limitations that eventually become completely self-imposed.
We box ourselves in.
We start to bow and scrape, and we apologize for making even the simplest of requests. "I'm so sorry to bother you. I know you're busy, but do you think I could maybe get a tiny raise this year?"
Exactly. The strategy of the crown is the deliberate, conscious antidote to that shrinking of horizons.
So how do we apply the antidote?
It requires forcing ourselves in the opposite direction. It requires a daily effort to downplay our past failures, to actively ignore the imposed limitations of society, and to make ourselves demand and expect as much as the child does. We have to run a specific psychological protocol on ourselves.
It's about recognizing that the cause and effect of confidence is a two-way street.
How so?
If we deeply believe we are destined for great things, that belief will radiate outward, just as a physical crown creates a literal, visible aura around a monarch. This outward radiance infects the people around us.
It's contagious.
They see our ease, our lack of anxiety, and they subconsciously think, well, they must have reasons to feel so secure.
People who wear crowns seem to feel no inner sense of limits regarding what they can ask for or accomplish. That boundlessness is contagious.
I love that word, boundlessness.
The limits and boundaries in the minds of the people they are interacting with simply melt away. Think of how adults react to a happy, confident child who asks for whatever they want. Their high expectations are their charm.
You want to give it to them.
Adults actually enjoy granting their wishes, just as Queen Isabella eventually enjoyed granting the grandiose wishes of Columbus. It made her feel grand to grant such a grand request.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The trick is simply to allow yourself to be overcome by your own self-belief. Even if you know, logically, that you are practicing a kind of deception on yourself, you must act like a king to be treated as one.
Exactly.
But here is the catch. A crown is just a piece of metal. To really cement this status, you need armor.
You need protection.
Because the world will test you. The crown separates you from the crowd, but you have to make that separation hold up in the face of intense adversity and hostility.
And that armor is dignity. Dignity is the absolute prerequisite for the crown.
It's the foundation.
One way to emphasize your difference, your royal bearing, is to always act with unbreakable dignity, no matter how chaotic or degrading the circumstance.
Which is incredibly hard to do.
It is. If we look back at Louis-Philippe, the bourgeois king, the moment his subjects threatened him, he panicked. He fired people, he caved in, he ran away in disguise. Lacking regal dignity and firmness of purpose, he proved he was an imposter, and his crown was easily toppled.
To see the exact opposite of that panic, we have to look at one of the most incredible displays of grace under fire in modern history.
Oh, this is a great story.
The story of a young man named Louis-Philippe, who the world would later know as Haile Selassie, the Emperor of Ethiopia, for over 40 years.
It's a stunning historical example of the armor of dignity. Louis-Philippe came from the noble family, but he was very far down the line of succession from the sitting monarch, King Menelik II.
So he wasn't supposed to be king.
There was no logical, mathematical chance of him ever coming to power. Nevertheless, from a very early age, Tafari exhibited a self-confidence and a deep, tranquil royal bearing that genuinely unnerved the people around him.
At the age of 14, Tafari goes to live at the royal court. He immediately catches the eye of King Menelik and becomes his favorite.
Which puts a huge target on his back.
Huge. Why was he the favorite? Because of his supernatural patience and his calm self-assurance. Think about the vicious environment of a royal court.
It's just constant plotting and scheming.
He's the slight, bookish, quiet teenager surrounded by older nobles who are arrogant, blustery, and deeply envious of the king's favor. These older nobles would constantly push him around, insult him, and try to provoke him into a reaction.
But the key to Tafari's future was his reaction to the bullying.
What did he do?
He never got angry. He never yelled back. Because anger, in that context, would have been a massive sign of insecurity.
It would have given them power over him.
It would have meant stooping to their level, playing their game, and acknowledging their power to affect his emotional state. Instead, he treated their insults as if they were the buzzing of flies.
I love that image.
He acted as if he were already operating on a plane far above them. And slowly, the people around the court began to feel that he would eventually rise to the top, precisely because he was the only one acting like he belonged there.
And he maintained this impenetrable armor decades later, under unimaginably hostile and tragic circumstances. Fast forward to 1936.
A very dark time.
The Italian fascists under Mussolini have invaded and taken over Ethiopia. Tafari, now crowned Emperor Haile Selassie, is forced into exile. He travels to Geneva to address the League of Nations to plead his country's case to the world.
And the atmosphere is toxic.
As he steps up to the podium, the Italian fascist journalists in the gallery start actively heckling him. They are screaming vulgar abuse, blowing whistles, trying to drown him out and humiliate him on the world stage.
And his response is a masterclass in the power of the crown. He didn't shout over them. He didn't look flustered. He didn't appeal to the guards to make them stop.
He didn't let them see him sweat.
He simply stood at the podium in absolute silence. He maintained his dignified pose, gazing out at the hall, acting as if he were completely, biologically unaffected by the vulgarity being hurled at him.
That is so powerful.
This reaction did two things simultaneously. It elevated him to a plane of untouchable nobility, and it made his fascist opponents look even uglier, more childish, and more base by comparison.
There is a quote from the 17th century philosopher Balthazar Gracian that captures the essence of Haile Selassie in that moment. Gracian wrote, "Never lose your self-respect. Desist from unseemly conduct, rather out of respect for your own virtue than for the strictures of external authority. Come to hold yourself in awe."
Come to hold yourself in awe.
What a breathtaking instruction. Dignity in difficult circumstances is the ultimate mask. It signals that nothing can affect you, that you are entirely self-contained, and that you have all the time in the world to respond.
It is an incredibly powerful, deeply disarming pose. When someone is screaming at you, or trying to diminish you in a meeting, or attacking your work, and you simply observe them with calm, silent dignity, it completely short-circuits their attack.
They don't know what to do.
They are spending all this energy expecting a defensive reaction. When you give them nothing but tranquil assurance, their energy bounces back on them. They end up feeling frantic and small, while you appear massive.
So we've talked about the internal mindset. We know we need the audacity of Columbus and the silent dignity of Haile Selassie.
The theory is sound.
But if a listener is sitting at their desk right now feeling chronically overlooked, how do they actually operationalize this? Because if you just sit silently in meetings and then suddenly demand a 300% raise, you aren't radiating destiny. You're just being weird.
Yeah, that's a quick way to get HR involved.
Exactly. How do we transition from this internal philosophy to external tactics?
That is the pivotal step. The internal belief, holding yourself in awe, is only the foundation. To make the crown real in the eyes of the world, you have to execute specific, outward strategies in your daily interactions.
Okay, lay them out for us.
We can break down 3 explicit tactical executions to reinforce a royal demeanor in the real world.
Okay, let's break these down. The first tactic is one we've already seen in action with our favorite Genoese explorer, the Columbus strategy.
Yes, the Columbus strategy is straightforward in theory, but requires immense nerve in practice. Always make a bold demand. Set your price high and do not waver.
It's so hard to do in practice.
We are conditioned to negotiate against ourselves before we even open our mouths.
Great.
But if you ask for less, you are establishing your own ceiling. That is exactly what you will get at best.
Right.
If you ask for more, you send an immediate psychological signal that you are worth a king's ransom. And the brilliant part of this strategy is that even if the other party turns you down or negotiates you lower, they will subconsciously respect you for your initial confidence. That respect permanently alters the dynamic of every future interaction you have with them.
I see this all the time in salary negotiations. The number you put on the table isn't just a financial figure. It is a declaration of your self-worth.
Absolutely.
If you lowball yourself just to ensure you get the job, you might get the job, but you have entered the relationship as a willing inferior. You've told them, I don't value my time highly, so you shouldn't either.
You've set the baseline.
But if you ask for the top of the band, even if they say, we can't meet that, but we can offer this, they are now treating you as a premium asset they got a slight discount on, rather than a bargain bin hire.
Precisely. The second outward strategy is called the David and Goliath strategy.
Okay, what's that one?
This involves how you choose your conflicts. If you are going to make a stand or pick a fight, you must go after the highest person in the building, but you must do so in a deeply dignified way. By choosing a great, powerful opponent or target, you immediately create the appearance of greatness for yourself.
This makes perfect sense. If you are a junior executive and you get into a petty turf war with another junior executive over who gets the better office chair, you both look small.
It's just petty.
You are defining your status by the pettiness of your conflicts. But if you respectfully, intelligently challenge the CEO's strategy in a meeting, not with anger, but with dignified analysis, you instantly elevate yourself to the same plane as the chief executive. You are signaling that your ideas belong at the top level.
You elevate your own status by elevating the status of the person you are engaging with.
Right.
And that leads to the third tactic, which is perhaps the most nuanced and counterintuitive, the gift strategy.
The gift strategy.
This involves giving a gift of some sort to those above you in the hierarchy. Traditionally, this was the strategy of someone seeking a wealthy patron, but the psychology applies to any hierarchical relationship today. By giving your patron or superior a gift, you're essentially signaling that the two of you are peers.
There is a great historical example of this with the Renaissance writer Pietro Aretino.
Yes, the Duke of Mantua's story.
He wanted the extremely powerful Duke of Mantua to become his new patron. Now, the standard operating procedure for a writer in the Renaissance was to approach a duke and be slavish, sycophantic, and beg for money and support.
Basically groveling.
But Aretino knew that if he acted like a beggar, the duke would view him as a beggar, someone unworthy of substantial ongoing respect or funding.
So Aretino completely inverted the paradigm. He approached the Duke not with a begging bowl, but with magnificent gifts.
Bold move.
Specifically, he gifted the Duke paintings by his good friend, the legendary artist Titian. By offering these incredibly valuable gifts up front, without asking for anything in return, he created an illusion of psychological equality.
Wow.
The Duke accepted the gifts and was immediately put at ease by the feeling that he was dealing with a man of his own aristocratic stamp, a fellow man of culture and means. As a result of this established peerage, the Duke ended up funding Aretino incredibly generously.
I love the description of this as the oldest con game in the book. Giving so that you can take, you are entirely removing the act of begging from the equation.
You're changing the game.
You are asking for help in a dignified way that implies a fundamental equality between two people, where one just happens to have more liquid resources at the moment.
It's subtle, but it completely rewrites the power dynamic.
I try to think of a modern, everyday equivalent to this. Imagine you are a young professional and you finally manage to score a 30-minute coffee meeting with a highly influential titan in your industry, a mentor you desperately want to learn from.
Classic scenario.
When the bill for the 2 coffees comes, the natural instinct is to step back and let the rich mentor pay because they have millions and you are barely making rent.
Right, they could afford it.
But the gift strategy would dictate that you immediately insist on paying for the coffees. It's a tiny financial gesture, like $8, but psychologically it is massive. It immediately establishes that you aren't a mooch. It shifts the dynamic from a supplicant begging for free wisdom to 2 professionals having a conversation.
It tells the mentor, I value your time, and I am a peer in spirit, if not yet in bank balance. It's brilliant. And it's worth noting that this projection of a royal demeanor is so powerful that it is frequently weaponized outside of legitimate business. Con artists have long known the sheer hypnotic value of an aristocratic front.
Oh, this is the dark side of the crown. Characters like Count Victor Lustig, the man who famously sold the Eiffel Tower twice, and the Yellow Kid Weil.
Legendary con men. They understood deeply that an aristocratic front does one of 2 things to a mark. It either completely disarms them and makes them less suspicious because we are conditioned to trust high-status individuals, or it intimidates them and puts them on the defensive.
And either way, they win.
Lustig knew that the moment you put a sucker on the defensive, making them feel like they have to prove their own worth to you, they are doomed. The Yellow Kid Weil would assume the trappings of immense wealth and the aloof nonchalance that goes with it. He wouldn't aggressively push his fake investments. He would stand aloof, like a bored king, vaguely alluding to some magical method of making money.
He played hard to get.
Exactly.
And the marks would literally beg him to take their money. They would beg to be let in on the con, just to have a chance to be near the wealth and status he so effortlessly displayed. He activated their desire to be close to the crown, and it bypassed all their critical thinking.
Which proves just how potent this psychological glitch is.
It's almost scary.
But we have to pivot here, because while we've talked extensively about how to forge this crown, how to wear it, and the tactics to make others see it, we need to issue a massive warning.
Proceed with caution.
Crowns are incredibly heavy, and if you aren't careful, if you lack self-awareness, that crown can easily slip over your eyes and blind you. Or worse, he can get your head chopped off. We have to talk about the reversal of this concept. What happens when you cross the delicate line from dignity into outright arrogance?
This is the trap that destroys so many leaders who think they are being strong. Affecting regal confidence is fundamentally about setting yourself apart, about holding yourself in awe. But taking it too far, weaponizing that separation, is disastrous.
It's a fatal flaw.
The golden rule here is that you must never make the mistake of thinking you elevate yourself by humiliating other people. Arrogance may seem like a king's entitlement to an untrained eye, but psychologically it broadcasts deep insecurity. True power doesn't need to insult anyone. Arrogance is the exact opposite of a true royal demeanor.
And to illustrate the catastrophic, literal danger of arrogance, we have to look at King Charles I of England during the 1640s.
Charles I is the ultimate cautionary tale of looming too high. During his reign, he was facing profound, widespread public disenchantment with the institution of the monarchy. Revolts were erupting throughout the country, led by the parliamentarian Oliver Cromwell.
The ground was shifting under his feet.
The ground beneath Charles was shifting violently. Now, Charles was at a crossroads. He had options. He could have reacted to the changing times with insight. He could have supported some reforms, made a public show of sacrificing a fraction of his absolute power, and very likely saved his throne and his life.
But he lacked the fluidity of true confidence. Instead of adapting, Charles doubled down on his aura.
He went the wrong way.
He reverted to an even more rigid, stiff, regal pose. He seemed personally deeply outraged that anyone would dare question his power or the divine institution of the monarchy.
How dare they?
He refused to bend even a single millimeter to the changing political reality. He treated the rebels not as a serious political force, but as insolent children who needed to be swatted away.
And that rigid, stiff kingliness completely alienated everyone. It offended the moderate people who might have supported him. It spurred on the revolts. It proved to the country that he was completely out of touch with reality and incapable of governing a changing nation.
He painted a target on his own back.
By looming too high, by demanding absolute reverence while refusing to acknowledge the power of his opponents, he made himself an easy, static target, and eventually the revolution succeeded and Charles III lost his head.
Literally.
Literally, he was executed.
The lesson there is paramount. You must radiate confidence, not disdain. Dignity is a shield to protect yourself from the chaos of the world. It is not a sword to strike down others. When you use your status to belittle people, you create enemies who will wait patiently for the moment your armor cracks.
So looming too high and becoming rigid is one fatal trap. But there is another trap on the complete opposite end of the spectrum.
The other extreme.
If Charles I was too stiff, this next trap is about being too loose. It is the trap of earthy vulgarity. And history gives us a bizarre, hilarious, but deeply instructive story from the ancient Greek historian Herodotus to prove this point.
Yes, the story of Hippocrates. It's an amazing piece of history.
Tell us.
The story takes place in the ancient Greek city of Sicyon. The master of the city, a man named Cleisthenes, has a daughter named Agarista, and he is trying to find the absolute perfect husband for her.
The ultimate bachelor setup.
Exactly. This isn't just a marriage. It's a transfer of legacy and immense power. So Cleisthenes makes a public announcement during the Olympic Games. Any Greek noble who thinks himself worthy has 60 days to present himself in Sicyon.
And Cleisthenes doesn't just do a couple of interviews. He literally builds a racetrack and a wrestling ring on his estate just to physically test these suitors.
He's very thorough.
He brings a group of the finest young men in Greece into his house and keeps them there for an entire year. He tests their athletic prowess, their manly qualities, their temper, their education, and their manners. And the most important test of all, according to Herodotus, is their behavior at the dinner table. Cleisthenes is watching to see who has the true bearing of a leader.
After a year of this grueling, intense scrutiny, he narrows the field down. A young Athenian named Hippocrates emerges as the clear favorite.
He's the front runner.
He is handsome, he has proven himself the doughtiest champion in athletics, and he's brilliant in music and conversation. He's the complete package. The day of the betrothal finally arrives. Cleisthenes sacrifices 100 oxen and throws a massive, lavish banquet for the suitors and everyone of note in the city to announce his decision.
And this is where Hippocrates fumbles the bag in the most spectacular, self-destructive way imaginable.
It's painful to read.
After dinner, the men are drinking wine, competing in music, and talking. Hippocrates, feeling incredibly confident, asks the flute player to play a tune, and he begins to dance. Now, Cleisthenes is watching this, and he's starting to have some doubts, because dancing wildly isn't exactly the dignified behavior expected of a future ruler.
But Hippocrates is caught up in the moment and takes it to the next level. He sends for a wooden table.
Oh, no.
He climbs onto the table in front of the entire banquet hall and dances some Laconian dances, then some Attic ones, and then, for his grand finale, he stands on his head on the table and begins beating time to the music with his legs in the air.
Beating time with his legs in the air. Cleisthenes has spent a year vetting this guy, pouring vast resources into finding a dignified heir to inherit his legacy, and the frontrunner gets drunk and does a headstand on the banquet table.
It's a complete disaster.
Cleisthenes is utterly disgusted. He finally snaps, stands up, and yells, "Son of Tyser, you have danced away your marriage!"
And Hippocrates famously replied, "Hippocrates doesn't care," which actually became a Greek proverb.
He tried to play it cool.
He did. But the fact remains, he lost the ultimate prize. This story perfectly encapsulates the danger of what we can call the vulgarity trap. It's the class clown syndrome. Sometimes you can find a fleeting sense of power or amusement by affecting a kind of earthy vulgarity. It can be entertaining.
Sure, people love a spectacle.
It draws immediate attention because of its extremeness. People might laugh, clap, and cheer you on. But
it's a trap because you are trading long-term authority for short-term attention. To the extent that you try to win the social game by going beyond the limits, separating yourself by being louder, more vulgar, or more outrageous than everyone else, you are playing a doomed game.
It is doomed because it is a race to the bottom. There will always be someone younger, worse, and more desperate for attention who is willing to be even more vulgar than you.
You can't out-vulgar the next guy forever.
You can't hold the title of most outrageous forever. You will easily be replaced the following season by a new novelty. Hippocrates thought he was being the life of the party. He thought he was showing how supremely confident and untouchable he was. But true authority, the kind Cleisthenes was looking for to secure his city's future, requires dignity. By literally turning himself upside down, Hippocrates proved he didn't have the gravity to hold the crown.
Synthesizing these two extremes, Charles I and Hippocrates, is the key to mastering this entire philosophy. Charles I shows us the fatal danger of looming too high, becoming rigid, and demanding reverence without flexibility. Hippocrates shows us the danger of throwing your dignity away for a cheap laugh. The sweet spot, the true royal fashion, is finding that middle ground. It is a calm, tranquil assurance that elevates you, but also puts others at ease because they feel secure in your presence.
Exactly. It's the FDR model again. You possess the massive status, but you deploy it with grace. You don't need to crush people to prove you are strong, and you don't need to act the fool to prove you are approachable.
Which brings us to the end of an incredible journey today. Let's do a rapid-fire synthesis of the massive concepts we've explored. First, do not artificially lower your status to try and buy affection, like Louis-Philippe, the bourgeois king with his umbrella. Pretending the power dynamic doesn't exist breeds contempt, and when real trouble comes, your authority will vanish like that traveling circus.
Second, understand that it is entirely within your power to set your own price in the world, just like Christopher Columbus. The world is a Veblen good. If you demand what you are worth with quiet, unshakable self-assurance, the world will often override its own logic and assume you are right.
Third, you must use dignity as your absolute armor against the chaos of the world. Like the young Haile Selassie standing in complete silence while the fascists screamed at him, true power is demonstrating that external vulgarity cannot reach your internal state. You must come to hold yourself in awe.
And finally, you must actively avoid the fatal extremes that ruin leaders. Arrogance, like the rigidity of Charles I, is just masked insecurity that will eventually cost you your head. And extreme vulgarity, the desperate need for attention, like the dancing Hippocrates, will only ensure that you dance away your own future.
Sitting here thinking about all these historical figures, I want to frame this for your actual life. Tomorrow morning, when you walk into your office or a client meeting or even a daunting social event, you possess the power to set the opening bid on your worth. The world is incredibly busy, and frankly, it is incredibly lazy. It will accept the valuation you put on yourself because it doesn't have the time to audit your soul. If you shuffle your feet, apologize for speaking, and ask for little, the world will nod and assume that is exactly who you are. But you can choose to act differently. You can choose to put the crown on.
And as we close out this deep dive, there is one lingering psychological concept from earlier that I think is deeply worth exploring on your own time. We discussed how, as children, we naturally demand everything from the world, and it is only the rebuffs of adults that shrink our horizons and teach us to ask for less. So consider this question. What is one massive, unapologetic expectation you had for your life as a child, an ambition or a standard that you abandoned simply because someone along the way told you to be realistic, and what would happen if you decided to put that specific crown back on your head today?
That is a phenomenal question to sit with. Remember how we started talking about confidence as a bank account where you had to check your balance? Well, it turns out the ledger is entirely blank, and you are the one holding the pen. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.